Hello, I'm Jeremy Appel. This is Headlines, where I guide you through some of the day's top news stories. If you value my work here at the Orchard and have the means, please consider becoming a paid subscriber. For as little as $8 a month, you can help make this newsletter financially sustainable. We begin today in the online realm. Researchers in Montreal have uncovered a series of deliberately inauthentic YouTube accounts, pushing thousands of videos that purport to be from concerned Canadians who favor Alberta separatism and U.S. annexation. These videos contain frequent and blatant lies, Charles Resnell writes in the Tyee. These include claims that a majority of people in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta want to separate and possibly become part of the US. They also contain basic factual errors, notes Alex Boyd in the Toronto Star. These include mispronouncing the name of Saskatchewan's capital, Regina, and misgendering far-right BC MLA Dallas Brody. The network of accounts was discovered by the Media Ecosystem Observatory, which characterized them as part of a potential covert influence operation in a report released Tuesday. The observatory cautioned, however, that it's impossible to determine exactly who is behind these accounts, given the widespread availability of VPNs. The researchers characterized the videos as slopaganda. This refers to the practice of generating repetitive, low-quality, AI-generated content to push a political message. These videos have reached 40 million viewers through 20 YouTube accounts. They combine AI-generated content with real voice actors and news clips from mainstream media and YouTube, suggesting a degree of editorial sophistication. The observatory researchers found that the videos were more than 10 times more likely to speak positively of American annexation than separatist social media accounts. Former RCMP intelligence officer Patrick Lennox told Resnell at the Tyee that any common sense reading of that report would suggest that the network is part of an American influence job. He added, "I think if you just look at it more broadly, it suggests that there is very clearly an American-led attempt to normalize and amplify the idea of Alberta becoming the 51st state of the US. And the coordination effort is so obvious." Next up, we turn to Ottawa. The Globe and Mail reports that the federal government would like to see a new tar sands pipeline ship crude to BC's southern coast, rather than the northern route favored by Alberta's government. Prime Minister Mark Carney and Premier Danielle Smith signed an agreement in November, paving the way for a new $1 million barrel a day pipeline through BC, which didn't specify its route. The feds are said to favor a pipeline to the port of Vancouver because the project is less likely to face opposition from First Nations and fewer environmental hurdles, 3 confidential federal sources told the Globe. There's no private sector proponent for a new oil sands pipeline, so Premier Smith has taken it upon herself to file the application, which is still forthcoming. Smith reportedly expects that the feds will fast-track the pipeline as a national interest project in autumn. The route preferred by the feds could either run alongside the existing Trans Mountain pipeline or be an entirely new route. But either option would require building a new oil tanker terminal on the Vancouver coast to accommodate increased traffic. Alberta prefers a pipeline to the port of Prince Rupert in the north because it takes 3 fewer days for tankers to travel from there to Shanghai. The northern port is also deeper than the one in Vancouver, enabling bigger tankers to sail. It would, however, require the feds to lift a ban on tanker traffic on BC's northern coast. Meanwhile, Edmonton and Ottawa continue negotiations to create a path for Alberta's $20 a ton industrial carbon price to reach the federal price of $130. There was supposed to be an agreement by April 1st on this key condition for the feds supporting a new pipeline. Turning to Edmonton, former NDP Premier Rachel Notley has been relatively quiet about Alberta politics since she resigned as an MLA in 2024. In a Tuesday Globe and Mail op-ed, Notley came out swinging against the UCP government's apparent efforts at what she called Trump-style gerrymandering of Alberta's electoral map. Premier Daniel Smith has appointed a UCP-dominated committee to redraw electoral boundaries after the Bipartisan Electoral Boundaries Commission, or EBC, released a majority and minority report with different sets of maps. This was the first time in history that a minority report hasn't just quibbled with specific aspects of the majority report, but actually proposed an entirely different set of maps. While the EBC listened to hours of public feedback as part of its mandate, the Smith-appointed panel has no such obligation. Notley writes that she was very disappointed in the results of the EBC's final proposed maps in 2016, when she was premier. That report merged two NDP-held Calgary ridings, eliminated Medicine Hat's NDP-held urban riding in favor of a rural-urban hybrid riding, and effectively eliminated an NDP-held northern riding that Notley's father, Grant, used to represent when he was leader of the Alberta NDP before his untimely death. Notley writes that at no time did I even casually consider abusing my power as premier or our legislative majority to reverse the work of the Boundaries Commission. This was the norm followed by previous conservative governments as well. Since leaving office, Notley writes, I've witnessed attack after attack on democracy. Notley specifically references the use of the notwithstanding clause 4 times last year to strip the constitutional rights of striking teachers, transgender youth, and trans women athletes. These flagrant affronts to democracy, accountability, and ethics have been difficult to watch, writes Notley. Moving down the continent, we turn to Mexico. Following a drug raid on Sunday, 2 staffers from the U.S. Embassy were killed in a car crash alongside 2 Mexican government officials. Nick Terse from The Intercept now reports that the U.S. officials worked for the CIA. 2 confidential U.S. government sources told Terse that the embassy staffers were casualties of American covert operations in Mexico. They were killed after a raid on a synthetic drug lab, the officials added. After initially stating that the Americans were killed in the raid, Mexican authorities soon backtracked, claiming that they were conducting training for drone operations and had nothing to do with the raid. Terse places this development in the context of the so-called Don Roe Doctrine. Invoking the 19th century Monroe Doctrine, U.S. President Donald Trump has ramped up activities in Latin America under the guise of combating drug trafficking. These include dozens of fatal strikes on civilian boats in the Caribbean Sea and Pacific Ocean, as well as invading Venezuela and deposing its president. The U.S. also launched a joint counter-cartel effort with Ecuador, dubbed Operation Total Extermination, in March. In January, President Donald Trump ordered the U.S. Northern Command, or NORTHCOM, to establish the Joint Interagency Task Force Counter-Cartel. The task force is intended to develop cartel targets for U.S. partners and provide support for local U.S. law enforcement. Last week, Northcom Commander General Gregory Guillot told Congress that the task force was feeding the Mexican government and local authorities information based on leads developed from foreign intelligence operations. Both President Trump and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth have raised the prospect of sending the U.S. military into Mexico to combat cartels. The Trump administration has named several cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum, however, has rejected such overtures. Finally, in Europe, an effort to suspend the EU-Israel free trade agreement over Israeli human rights abuses has been shelved. Representatives of Ireland, Slovenia, and Spain sought to discuss the prospect of suspending the agreement at an April 21st EU foreign ministers meeting in Luxembourg. Al Jazeera reports that the proposal faced fierce pushback from the German and Italian governments. German Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul calls the proposal inappropriate. Despite daily reports of Israeli violence in the West Bank and Gaza, Wadephul called for more critical, constructive dialogue with Israel to address its behavior. Italian Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani confirmed that the proposal was blocked. He added that other unspecified initiatives will be discussed at the next Foreign Affairs Ministers meeting in May. Spain, Slovenia, and Ireland's foreign ministers argue that Israel is in breach of the 1995 EU-Israel Association Agreement, which ties relations to respect for human rights. A Netherlands-initiated EU review has already found that Israel likely wasn't fulfilling these obligations. Spain and Slovenia have both banned imports from illegal Israeli settlements in the West Bank. Ireland has passed legislation to that effect, but it hasn't yet been implemented. The European Union can no longer remain on the sidelines, the Spanish, Slovenian, and Irish foreign ministers wrote in a letter last week to EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas. Those are your headlines for Tuesday, April 21st, 2026. If you want me to be able to continue doing this sort of work, please consider becoming a paid Orchard subscriber. Catch you next time.